Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside to enjoy your coffee, and finding an official-looking letter taped to your front door. That was exactly how my story began. The bold HOA logo at the top instantly made my stomach twist. And as I unfolded the paper, the words leapt out at me. Your solar panels are in direct violation of HOA policy. Remove them immediately or face daily fines. I stood there stunned. My solar panels weren't just a decoration. They were a carefully planned investment. I'd spent months researching, saving, and finally installing them to reduce my energy bills and do something good for the environment. To me, they represented independence, responsibility, and a step toward a cleaner future. But to Karen, our neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer of the HOA, they were apparently an eyesore that had to go. Karen had always been vocal about what she thought was acceptable in the neighborhood. From mailbox paint colors to how tall grass could grow, she thrived on citing obscure rules. But this was different. Solar panels weren't just some garden gnome she disliked. They were protected by state law. Still, she was determined to make me remove them. Later that afternoon, she showed up at my driveway, arms crossed, her sunglasses perched high on her nose like a shield of authority. "You've got until the end of the week," she said, her voice sharp. "The HOA rules are clear. No solar panels on visible parts of your roof. If you don't comply, the fines will start adding up." I calmly told her that I'd already checked with the installation company and even consulted state regulations. Homeowners in our state had the right to install solar panels, even if the HOA objected. But Karen wasn't interested in facts. She thrived on control. "Well," she snapped, "the board agrees with me, and the rules are the rules. You'll see just how serious we are when the fines hit your mailbox." She spun around and marched off, heels clicking like a judge delivering a final sentence. For a moment I felt cornered. I knew I was in the right, but the HOA had power, and Karen had influence. If they started hitting me with fines, it could spiral into something costly and exhausting. Still, I wasn't going to back down. If Karen wanted a fight, I'd give her one. But this time, the law was on my side. And as I soon discovered, the battle between one stubborn HOA Karen and state law was about to become a neighborhood spectacle. No one would forget. The next week arrived faster than I expected, and with it came the first envelope. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA. "You are hereby fined $100 for non-compliance. Failure to remove your solar panels will result in continued daily penalties." I held the paper in my hands, a mixture of anger and disbelief washing over me. $100 a day. That wasn't just a warning shot. That was financial warfare. If they kept this up, the fines could easily spiral into thousands. Clearly, Karen had pushed this through with the board, and they were all too happy to back her crusade. But I wasn't about to panic. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the solar installation company. The representative on the line confirmed what I already knew. State law explicitly protected homeowners from HOA restrictions when it came to solar energy. In fact, the statutes even used the phrase, "HOAs may not unreasonably restrict the use of solar devices." Still, knowing the law and enforcing it were two very different things. Karen was betting on the fact that most homeowners wouldn't have the time, energy, or money to fight back. But I wasn't most homeowners. The next morning, Karen came striding up my driveway again. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. "The fines will keep stacking," she said smugly, as if daring me to argue. "You can't win against the HOA. This time I smiled. "Actually, Karen, I can. You see, the state already ruled on this years ago. Your fines? They're not just unfair, they're illegal." Her smirk faltered for the first time, but she quickly regained her composure. "We'll see about that. The HOA lawyers don't lose." And with that, she stormed off, clearly rattled that I hadn't backed down. I knew what I had to do next. That evening, I drafted a formal letter, citing the exact state statutes protecting my right to keep the solar panels. I attached a copy of the notice from the HOA and sent it off to the State Energy Commission. If Karen thought she could bully me into compliance, she was about to learn what happens when you push the wrong person too far. Over the following days, the tension in the neighborhood thickened. Some neighbors whispered encouragement when Karen wasn't around, quietly telling me they admired my stand. Others avoided eye contact, clearly afraid of getting on her bad side. But me? I was just waiting, because I knew the state's response was coming. And when it finally arrived, the real showdown was about to begin. The letter from the state arrived in a thick envelope, stamped with the seal of the Department of Energy and Housing. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, because this was the moment everything hinged on. Inside was a formal notice addressed to both me and the HOA board. The words practically leapt off the page. "State law supersedes HOA restrictions regarding solar energy devices. Homeowners may not be fined, penalized, or otherwise restricted for lawful installation of solar panels. It was crystal clear. The state had my back. I made copies of the letter and dropped them in the HOA's mailbox slots, making sure Karen's copy was on top of her neat little stack of envelopes. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I saw her standing at the end of her driveway, reading the notice. Her face turned from pale shock to blotchy red anger in a matter of seconds. She stormed toward me, waving the paper in the air like it was a personal insult. "This doesn't mean anything," she snapped. "The board will appeal. You can't just ignore the HOA's authority." I kept my voice calm, though inside I was savoring every second. "Karen, it means everything. The state has spoken. Your fines are invalid, and my solar panels are staying right where they are." Her jaw tightened, and for once she had no snappy comeback. She spun on her heel and stormed away, muttering under her breath. But I knew her silence wasn't surrender. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat quietly. If anything, this would only fuel her. Sure enough, the very next week, the HOA called a special community meeting. The flyer on my door announced it in bold letters. Discussion: solar panels and HOA authority. Everyone in the neighborhood was invited. I knew this wasn't just a meeting, it was Karen's stage, her chance to rally the board and neighbors against me. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. Neighbors filled every chair, whispers buzzing through the room. Karen stood at the front, flanked by the HOA president and treasurer. She adjusted her papers dramatically, then cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "our community is at a crossroads. One resident has chosen to defy the rules we all agreed upon when moving here. If we allow this behavior to continue, what's next? Neon lights on rooftops? Giant billboards? This is about protecting our neighborhood's image." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. All eyes shifted to me, waiting for my response. It was time to make my stand. Loud, clear, and undeniable. The room fell silent as I stood up, the weight of dozens of eyes on me. Karen had just painted me as a reckless rule breaker, someone threatening the very image of the community. I could see the smugness on her face as she adjusted her glasses, certain she had swayed the crowd. I took a deep breath and held up a copy of the state's letter. "This isn't about me ignoring rules," I began, my voice steady. "This is about an HOA trying to override state law. And let me be clear, the law is on my side." I read aloud the key section, emphasizing the words: "Homeowners may not be fined, penalized, or otherwise restricted for lawful installation of solar panels." The words echoed through the room. A few neighbors nodded, others whispered among themselves. But one thing was obvious. Karen hadn't mentioned this letter at all. Karen jumped to her feet, her voice sharp. "That's just one interpretation." "The HOA still has authority." I cut her off, holding the letter higher. "No, Karen, this isn't interpretation. This is the state's ruling, signed and sealed. Your fines are illegal, and your campaign against me isn't about rules. It's about control." The HOA president shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught between Karen's pressure and the undeniable weight of the law. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Well, perhaps we should consult with our legal advisor before proceeding further." Karen's face turned crimson. "You can't just let this slide," she barked. "If we don't stop him, everyone will think they can break the rules." That was the moment one of my neighbors, an older gentleman named Mr. Lewis, stood up. He'd lived in the neighborhood for decades, and when he spoke, people listened. "Karen," he said firmly, "these aren't broken rules. This is progress. Solar panels don't harm this neighborhood. They help it. Lower bills, cleaner energy. Frankly, I think more of us should be installing them." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. Her usual iron grip on the room was slipping. I pressed the advantage. "Look, I respect this community. I follow the rules when they're fair. But when the HOA tries to enforce rules that go against state law, that's where I draw the line. And the state agrees with me." The president finally nodded. "Until further notice, the fines are suspended." The room erupted into whispers and chatter. Karen's glare could have cut steel. But it didn't matter. The tide was turning. For the first time, she realized this was a battle she couldn't win so easily. But deep down, I knew she wasn't done yet. Karen never walked away without one last move. I knew Karen wouldn't accept defeat quietly, and sure enough, 2 weeks later another envelope showed up in my mailbox. But this time, it wasn't a fine. It was a legal threat. The HOA's attorney had drafted a letter, warning me that failure to comply with HOA rules could result in legal action. For a moment, I felt that same rush of anger and frustration. Karen had clearly pushed the board into one last, desperate move. But instead of panicking, I picked up the phone and called the state's Consumer Protection Office. I explained everything, from the fines to the threatening letters. The representative didn't even hesitate. "Sir," she said, "the HOA is violating state law. Not only are their fines void, but their legal threats could put them in serious trouble. We'll be contacting them directly." That was music to my ears. Within a week, the HOA received an official cease and desist notice from the state. It outlined in no uncertain terms that they were prohibited from fining, penalizing, or harassing homeowners over solar panels. Any further attempts could result in heavy penalties against the HOA itself. When the notice circulated through the neighborhood, the reaction was explosive. Neighbors who had been silent before now felt free to speak. Several even approached me, saying they were considering installing solar panels themselves. The once feared HOA crackdown had completely backfired. Karen's campaign had turned into a spark that encouraged others to follow my lead. And Karen? Well, she didn't take it well. For weeks, she stomped around the neighborhood with an expression like she'd bitten into a lemon. Her power, her authority, her iron grip on the HOA, it had all been shaken. Eventually, she stopped bringing up my panels altogether. And while I doubt she'll ever admit it, she knew she had lost. The victory wasn't just about keeping my solar panels. It was about standing up against unfair control. Too often people back down because fighting feels impossible. But when you know the law is on your side, when you know you're in the right, you fight. And sometimes you win. As for me, every time I look up at those sleek panels on my roof, I don't just see clean energy. I see a reminder that no matter how loud or intimidating someone like Karen can be, the truth and the law can be louder. The sun keeps shining, the panels keep working, and my electric bills, they're nearly non-existent. In the end, not only did I stand my ground, but I proved that one stubborn HOA Karen was no match for state law. And that, I'd say, is the sweetest victory of all.